not one to shy away from a good cold open sketch to get a video started on this channel, much to the begrudgment of those who had surgery to get their funny bones removed. Today is serious business though. We have no time for fun or jokes. We have a lot to cover. 50 years, in fact, since this May is the 50th anniversary of the beloved shoujo manga magazine that we are digging into today, HanaYume. I've done these magazine icebergs 2 times now, and both times I have found it near impossible to cover every series or important fact that came from them. I mean, in just the last one, I forgot the extremely popular manga series Maid-sama. That's how dire this is. Which is why we're foregoing the sketch. We're foregoing the antics. I need to cover as much ground today as possible, and hopefully do it in less than 45 minutes as well. Otherwise, the 2 sides of my brain that are constantly at war with each other will eventually explode.
I'm tired of this, Grandpa!
That's too damn bad! You keep digging!
HanaYume is arguably one of the most known shoujo manga magazines in America without the average manga fan even knowing its name. Many titles that are loved in the anime and manga community come from this magazine, like Kami-sama Kiss, Fruits Basket, or Yona of the Dawn, just to name a few. While the manga are just as popular here in the States, it's also thanks in large part to their anime adaptations having equal acclaim. These 3 series, plus tens of others from the magazine, constantly top the sales charts across the world. They also have extremely wide appeal to all demographics of readers, and change the landscape of manga as a whole. Even though print sales for magazines continue to decline, HanaYume, much like its sister magazine Lala, have been pretty steady still. Despite this, the magazine has had a considerable impact on manga, from now spanning all the way back to when it began in 1974. It's been known for its freedom of expression from the artists within, from having an abundance of series with male main characters, or series that contain less romance than what you would peg the typical shoujo to have. This can make the magazine feel less cohesive in its brand image, but that in itself is the brand, earning it the title of Galapagos Manga by shoujo researcher Makoto Oda. The reason this magazine falls off the beaten path is because of the publisher that it comes from, Hakusensha. This is actually the same publisher as Lala magazine, which is what we covered last time in our last deep dive. So the publisher and its roots may seem familiar to you if you sat through a 2-minute cold open sketch that had a joke in it that was dated by the time it came out already. See, I'm sparing you guys here. You don't have to watch me be funny. You're welcome. Hakusensha was founded in part by Nobumasa Konagai in 1973 after he left Shueisha's Betsuma magazine. By the time that he left Betsuma, he was already a well-known shoujo manga editor and had helped that magazine become a 1 million copy seller in the 60s and 70s. But now Konagai had a unique opportunity to start his own shoujo manga magazine from scratch, even if his company Hakusensha was still under Shueisha at the time. The magazine that Konagai wanted to create would address the demographic of girls who read manga that Shueisha had less focus on. Thus, Flowers and Dreams was created 5 months after the company was established, and he became the editor-in-chief. The first issue of HanaYume debuted in May of 1974, with the cover being drawn by Kazuko Koyano, a mangaka that followed Konagai over to Hakusensha and began serializing a title called Tabenkaya Son. With the first release of this magazine, they sold 230,000 copies with a sales rate of 97%, which is pretty amazing, especially considering this was the company's first ever magazine that they published. The biggest draw for this first issue was that a sequel series to Arabesque by Ryoko Yamagishi was going to be running in it. This ballet manga was already very popular previously and brought in existing fans to the new magazine. Not to mention the added bonus of Yamagishi being a big name artist herself. At first, the magazine was meant to be serialized monthly, as is the norm for most shoujo magazines. It's kind of been said that the weekly format just doesn't work for the style of writing that shoujo has. Unfortunately, due to corporate overlords though, so Konagai was forced to change the magazine to a bi-monthly release schedule on the 5th and 20th of every month, dramatically cutting the circulation sales in half after a stellar opening month. This release time has since been unchanged and makes HanaYume one of the few shoujo magazines that has a multiple release schedule, which is just another reason why it stands out. Now with the circulation of sales cut in half, Konagai had to figure out a way to keep people coming back to the magazine. They did have that sequel series to Arabesque, but they needed something to establish their own brand image. Something entirely fresh and new. Otherwise, this newly budding company would have no future. This niche came about a year later when HanaYume released two of its biggest hits in the magazine, Sukeban Deka and Glass Mask. Both of these series are mega hits in Japan even to this day, spawning live-action adaptations, films, anime, video games, stage plays, and so on. They are what got many people not only into HanaYume, nor even just shoujo manga, but manga in general, each revolutionary and pushing the boundaries of manga in their own ways. On top of this, paving the way for HanaYume to become what it is today. When looking at the two of them side by side, Sukeban Deka by Shinji Wada would be considered the outlier for shoujo manga even in the Outlier magazine. A Russian doll of not like other shoujo. The first reason is because Wada is one of the scarce few male mangaka that kept working in shoujo well past when women began to dominate. The second reason it stands out is because the series focuses on detective work, violent action, and a delinquent schoolgirl whipping out some stellar yo-yo moves to fight off bad guys. Yes, the main girl's weapon of choice is a metal yo-yo. And yes, she could solo Goku. The series ran for 22 volumes and has plenty spin-offs to spare, a few of which are currently still being published in other shoujo magazines like Princess by a different mangaka because Wada has since passed. His legacy has lived on for decades though, as Sukeban Deka took Japan by storm, popularizing the girl gang craze going forward with the help of the live-action TV adaptation that ran for 3 seasons. It also received a handful of film adaptations, one of which has the localized title that I love, Yo-Yo Girl Cop. This series is so fucking sick. Someone please license it. On the other hand, you have the more classic definition of shoujo from that time period, Glass Mask by Suzue Miyuchi, a series which follows 2 young girls who are vying for the starring role in a play. It's a still ongoing manga, although currently on hiatus with no end day in sight, that was a historic success. Only being beaten out by Boys Over Flowers, Glass Mask is the second best-selling shoujo series ever, with over 40 plus volumes and selling over 50 million copies. Definitely nothing to sneeze at, although if you told an American Shonen Jump fan this fact, they'd probably still sneeze at you. It would be no joke to say that Glass Mask is one of the most influential shoujo around. Miyuchi isn't considered to be one of the Magnificent 49ers who defined shoujo, but you could definitely say that her work has had a similar impact across manga. It has inspired countless artists and has been constantly referenced in so many different things. The dramatic faces from Glass Mask have remained ever iconic. Even though we've never gotten an English license for the manga of this classic yet, if you're interested in watching it, the anime adaptation from 2005 is available on Crunchyroll. Sukeban Deka and Glass Mask were 2 seminal works from the 70s that really shaped the HanaYume brand. However, there was one more manga that came out in this time that solidified the weirdness of this magazine. A manga that doesn't fit into the genre of action or drama that the other 2 filled. It was actually the complete opposite of those 2. The third manga that helped shape out HanaYume as a magazine was a gag comedy series called Patalliro by Maya Mineo. When you think of shoujo manga, you don't really think of gag comedies, especially not ones about 10-year-old boys wreaking havoc on Bishonen MI6 agents. The existence of a series like this is usually found more as a 2-page filler in the magazine and not really a fully fledged serialized work, which just makes Patalliro that much more notable as a manga. It was a big enough hit that it garnered the first ever anime adaptation for the magazine in 1982 and was one of the first anime in general to portray BL themes on TV. Children's TV, nonetheless. For shame. Japan has gone woke. With the success of all 3 of those manga, we have the wonderfully weird amalgamation of series in HanaYume, allowing it to put more focus on comedy or fantasy works and anything else in between. Put more simply, if it's in HanaYume, then anything goes, no matter the themes, the main characters, or the genre. You can really tell that the mangaka who have made works for this magazine over the years love it for this exact reason too. Each talks about the freedom that they get in the genres that they're writing. For example, the mangaka Sora, who's currently working on Suiraku JK Tohaijin in the magazine, stated that they have the power to place emphasis on things other than romance in the manga they create. Further saying, they first questioned whether the black comedy they're currently working on would be too dark for this magazine, but the editors loved it. The uniqueness is accepted in this shoujo magazine, which gives HanaYume that niche appeal for shoujo readers. Looking at their comedy works, the success of Patalliro definitely led to other slapstick comedy series being able to be made here, all of which had pretty great reception with the target and non-target readers. One popular series was called Animal Doctors by Rinko Sasaki, which follows a college student who joins a veterinarian program and meets a bunch of eccentric students and teachers along the way, adding in a dash of some wild cultural appropriation as well. It may have had a shorter run than the other comedy series that I'm about to be discussing, but even then, it was mentioned time and again as one of the first manga that introduced people to HanaYume. I would also argue that Baby and Me by Marimo Regawa, which started publishing in the 90s, could also be categorized in this genre. Once again, another extremely popular title, even more so in Japan because it was voted the best series from HanaYume in 2015 by fans. The series focuses on a young boy whose dad is away at work all the time and whose mom passed away early, so he has to take care of his younger brother, which may not feel like a comedic tone. However, the mix of drama with the lighthearted, silly comedic moments has that same feel as an 80s and 90s sitcom. Truly, the full house of the otaku generation.
Whatever happened to predictability?
In the comedy series I've mentioned so far, the romance elements are either relatively minor or non-existent. Romance comedies started to get more popularity in the 90s though, and HanaYume followed suit. They may be on the outer edge, but you need to follow trends to a degree. They just did it in the most HanaYume way possible by taking familiar tropes and settings and turning them on their head. Reverse harems, cross-dressing, and school sports settings may all seem like everyday fare in manga now, but they all once came from Hisaya Nakajo's famous title, Hana Kimi. The 23-volume-long series centers on a girl who wants to follow her track star idol to the same school that he attends, but it turns out that it's an all-boys school. So she does the normal thing by disguising herself as a boy and sharing the same room with him. It never did get an anime, but despite this, Hana Kimi found great success in its live-action TV adaptations across Asia. I found out that there was a K-drama adaptation that starred the Choi Min-ho from SHINee, so I am sat. Oh, sorry. Like Patalliro before it, Hana Kimi also had queer themes and an outwardly gay character as well. By today's standards, it's not like the greatest representation or anything, especially, you know, because the gay character gets played off as a gag quite a bit, but the queer themes were still present Not to mention, if you are a guy and you fall in love with another guy who you think is a guy at your boarding school, even after you find out they're a girl, you can never take that realization back. Just ask Li Shang. These more overt queer themes or characters is pretty common throughout HanaYume as well. The mangaka of Baby and Me went on to create the work New York, New York, which follows two gay men in, you guessed it, New York, during the AIDS crisis. Series like Godchild by Kaori Yuki also had those BL undertones too. They may as well have been overtones though, unless you were reading the series while sticking your head into the ground. Another example would be the title Tokyo Crazy Paradise by Yoshiki Nakamura of Skip Beat fame, which combines cross-dressing with the crazy gang action violence of Sukeban Deka. What's funny is if you throw Tokyo Crazy Paradise, Sukeban Deka, Patalliro, and even Hana Kimi into a blender, you would get a more recent comedy manga from the magazine, Oresama Teacher by Izumi Tsubaki, a series about a gang leader who wants to rebrand herself into a normal girl, but it turns out the school that she transfers to is full of rowdy students. Tsubaki may be more familiar to people as the mangaka of Gekkan Shoujo Nozaki-kun, but she really honed her comedic talents with this 29-volume long series that started in 2007. It combines the slapstick gags that you may know her for with the uniqueness of the delinquent action genre that HanaYume had a gorilla grip on. As we've established, there's no doubt that HanaYume excels in these comedy mangas. But there's another genre that they are even more known for. A genre of delight or terror should you choose which path to walk. The fantasy genre. This should come as no surprise though, because I already said some of the biggest series from HanaYume are titles like Kami-sama Kiss. They are so known for fantasy that some mangaka will even go specifically to HanaYume just to create that. An example of this being Shiki Chitose, who was able to create her human-turned-dragon fantasy series in the magazine called As Ferrario Chronicles. Monster romance. Don't mind if I do. Fantasy manga in this magazine can be anything from just some whimsical elements set in the real world like Fruits Basket, or completely new worlds built from the ground up like Yona of the Dawn. There's all kinds of superpowers, beasts, mythological tales, and intrigue that can be found here. Even if romance is in these series as well, they hardly take precedence over the characters or the story at hand. In cases like Yona of the Dawn, Mizuho Kusanagi was surprised to find out that fans were actually more excited when Yona killed a man than when her romance progressed with Hawk. That's just the kind of culture this magazine has created for the young girls that read it. While everyone may know the real big three of manga, that's Kami-sama Kiss, Fruits Basket, and Yona of the Dawn, there's so much more to HanaYume than just those three. So I'm sorry, but we aren't going to be covering them much in this video, besides just giving them a shout out. I love them, you love them, I own them, you can own them with today's sponsor, Walt's Comic Shop. Are you looking for English language manga in the EU? Then look no further than Walt's Comic Shop. They have thousands of manga currently in stock with an inventory that's growing daily. Waltz offers low shipping prices for any EU country with bulletproof packaging and speedy customer support. You can get manga like Fruits Basket and many more at waltzcomicshop.com, your #1 source for English language manga in Europe. Now let's get back to it. Even though it did start in the 70s, HanaYume never really found its fantasy-esque series that would define it until 1986 with the release of Please Save My Earth by Saki Hiwatari. This was more of a sci-fi supernatural than a fantasy series. However, you could argue that those genres kind of revolve around each other. Also considering the fact that Please Save My Earth focuses on 7 kids who regain the memories of their past life living on the moon, and also gaining the powers that they had at that time as well. If you have superpowers in a real world setting, I would say that could be fantasy. The series ran for 21 volumes and sold over 15 million copies in total. It was actually so popular that Hiwatari had to put at the beginning of every volume that it was a work of fiction because people had written her letters saying they also had the memories. Please Save My Earth really set a precedence for fantastical scenarios in this magazine going forward. For years after, you had a whimsical series like the 1990s title Tea Prince by Yamada Nanpei, a 25-volume long series that follows a British tea club that had tea princes appear before them and say they would grant their wishes. You also had the newer 2010s release, which is one of my favorite manga series ever, Colette Decides to Die by Alto Yukimura, which just got licensed in English by Viz. No big deal or anything. It's not like I fell to the floor and started licking their boots. This 20-volume long series follows a young doctor who is overworked and, wanting to end it all, jumps into a well only to find herself in the underworld where she meets Lord Hades. In between those decades, the 2000s gave us Gakuen Alice by Tachibana Higuchi as the go-to whimsical fantasy setting in the magazine. The story of a young girl who tries to follow her friend to the school that she's going to, only to find out that you can only attend if you have magical powers. It's like Harry Potter without J.K. Rowling, or My Hero Academia without Mineta. Both of those have equal hatred in my mind. This series ran for 31 volumes, although we only ever got 16 volumes in English because it was published by Tokyo Pop, and then Tokyo Pop went under. On top of that, it also had a 26-episode anime, which you can watch on Crunchyroll, 3 video games, and sold 7 million copies in total. If you can't tell by now, the media mix for Hakusensha titles, and specifically HanaYume, is incredible. It's probably the best media mix for a magazine out of anything I've talked about. Granted, I haven't mentioned Nakayoshi yet, which is like the home of the magical girl. That aside though, almost all of HanaYume's biggest titles have some sort of anime adaptation, live action adaptation, video game, something to sell with it. This is most likely how HanaYume titles have been revered across the world and not just contained within Japan. It helps keep up their popularity for decades to come because you have another piece of media that you may have grown up along with it. Chances are you know the world is still beautiful even if the American audience never got the manga because there was an anime adaptation. Maybe you've never read Special A, Skip Beat, Anonymous Noise, or Descendants of Darkness, but you've seen their anime adaptations. The Fruits Basket phenomenon happened twice because it was remade in 2019 for an entirely new audience. More recently, Sacrificial Princess and the King of Beasts got a little bit more attention because it had a fully adapted anime. All of these series became known outside of just the manga audience because Hakusensha and HanaYume have an incredible media mix marketing. With its 50th anniversary coming up, we are going to be getting a few more works through the media mix coming soon. Currently, Tamon's B-Side by Yuki Shiawasu is one of the next series rumored to be getting an anime adaptation. This is actually going to be Shiawasu's first series to get an anime, with her last series, Takana and Hana, getting a live-action TV drama. Tamon's B-Side has been one of HanaYume's fastest growing series since its debut, so this anime is sure to be a hit. While its covers may seem bubbly pink and full of cheer, it's actually rife with very dark comedy, following a young girl who happens to be hired as her favorite idol's housekeeper, until she finds out he's not the suave boy she thought him to be. This manga is really the perfect example of HanaYume's current iteration of the out-of-ordinary style. On the surface, it may just seem like a regular fan meets idol romance manga, but it has that typical HanaYume spin, making the idol character have an extremely negative viewpoint of himself, keeps the premise feeling fresh, and gives the character's dynamic a chance to shine. A fanfic as old as time, refurbished for a new generation by the Property Brothers. That anything goes attitude is how you get a lot of peculiar series in this magazine that leave people shocked. It fleshes out those gaps and makes sure that the magazine has no uniformity between its series. It's home to plenty of different types of stories that may seem atypical to non-readers. A few of these kinds of manga I've already mentioned, but for a few other examples, you have Here is Greenwood, which is focused on a boys' boarding school, and you also have Angel Sanctuary, which is about angels and demons and incest. What? Who said that? Show yourself.
I'm Briggs Hatton. I wrote the Community Season 6 incest episode.
With the exception of Suiraku, JK Tohaijin, and Tamon's B-side, not many of HanaYume's current series are as edgy as they used to be. This may be because, as we found out recently from an editor from Bretsu Frey, that Japan just wants lighter stories ever since the earthquake in 2011. That timeline would pretty much coincide with the kinds of manga we see in the magazine nowadays. A heavy emphasis has been more placed on the standard romance comedy fare that shoujo often gets pegged with. Some of these titles do have more bite to them, like Spring Storm and Monster, but nonetheless they are still high school romance comedies. It doesn't mean that the fantasy series and comedy works are completely gone from the magazine though. That's definitely far from the case. They just haven't been hitting the charts quite like their counterparts. Many of their current fantasy works are in the very early stages of their development with only a handful of volumes out. Many of them aren't set in entirely new fantasy worlds either. A few titles that have been garnering more buzz as of late are Otaku Vampire's Love Bite by Julieta Suzuki, which has 4 volumes out. This one is getting buzz because it is by the same mangaka as Kami-sama Kiss, so you already have that popularity along with it. It's also got some relatability to it despite being a fantasy premise because the main girl is an otaku vampire who ends up living next to a boy that looks like her favorite anime character. Surprisingly, it was in the same announcement that we got this series picked up by Viz as well. You also have the new series by the mangaka of Colette Decides to Die, which is called Pizzicato Sleeping Forest. This one only has 2 volumes out, but I think it has so much potential. The setting of it is very whimsical and isn't really anything I've read before because it's set in a farmhouse where sprites live. The last recent title that has gained a little popularity in the magazine is called Uchi no Kuro by Takidon. It originally was only supposed to be 3 chapters, but with how well received it was by the audience, it ended up getting a full serialization. It's another one set in a magic academy, kind of like Gakuen Alice, but not really, where a girl is able to read the mind of her tsundere classmate who says outwardly that they hate her, but inwardly is in love with her. The premise of this one is decent, but it still has quite a bit of work to do to get me anywhere invested in it. It's set in a magic academy, but doesn't really make use of the fact that it's in a fantasy world. I think for the most part, people just like this manga for the gap in personality that the male lead has. This kind of leads me into the main gripe that at least the American audience has had about HanaYume lately. It has been putting way too much emphasis on its male leads over its female leads, even if they aren't the main characters. Obviously, it wouldn't be uncommon for the love interest to be a popular character for any demographic, but shoujo has always kept its main focus on its female leads. They get cover pages, color art, or are the face of the series. However, nowadays, it feels like the male leads are the more important ones or are the selling factors. The male leads from Tamon's B-side, JK Tohaijin, It Takes More Than a Pretty Face to Fall in Love, and Spring Storm and Monster have been on pretty much every cover for the last few months. These dudes are almost inescapable. You even get double covers or collabs with multiples of these guys. Meanwhile, you may not even know what the female lead of the series looks like unless you read it and find out that she's still the driving force of the series. I wouldn't go so far as to say that the female characters have just become audience stand-ins, since they still have importance to the story and their own quirks. This may just be the American audience's gripe, because clearly this does sell well for HanaYume. They are continuing to do it. Especially if these series are their best-selling ones outside of their mainstays like Skip Beat and Yona of the Dawn. It would just be nice if the female characters in these manga would get more appreciation though. The editor of Tamon's B-side said that people who read HanaYume enjoy that it has stronger heroines in it, and that the heroine of Tamon's B-side is pretty loved. So I would love to see her and many of the others more often because of this. That being said, I think HanaYume has been as stable as ever as a magazine. In an era of declining magazine print sales, it's still selling more than many of its counterparts and diversifying as well. They've started many different digital versions of this magazine, as well as Hakusensha starting the Manga Park app, a place to read many of their titles for free on your phone, all of which definitely helped HanaYume remain relevant during the lockdown years. The magazine editors have clearly been looking into the future on ways to keep this magazine just as fresh as it was 50 years ago. It's still one of the most diverse shoujo manga magazines available for young girls in Japan, boasting a healthy mix of romance, fantasy, dark comedy, and the now ever so popular isekai. The freedom found in HanaYume comes directly from the unique expression the authors and editors have to share with their readers. Researcher Makoto Oda asked whether a girl has to meet a prince and fall in love, or the main character must be a girl in shoujo, ultimately coming to the conclusion that if it's HanaYume, the answer will be no. Which is why this magazine has become a shoujo fan favorite across readers of all ages, genders, and countries since it first began in 1974, 50 years ago. I've still only just hit the tip of the iceberg with all of the series that are from HanaYume. Plenty of their best-selling series that shaped the magazine for what it is today I still didn't even get to mention in this video. I even stayed serious the whole time, guys. I didn't make a sketch or anything. Yet, somehow, I still can't fit every series in. And I still go on forever and ever and just yap about anything. I guess I just have to give up my dream of listing every series that came from HanaYume in this video. Or do I? There's only one thing that I can think of that would help me create a long list of different names at the end of a thrilling 22 to 25 minute runtime with a couple ad breaks in between. But no, I can't. I said I wouldn't do any sketches. But I must. Take it away! There's been 50 years of HanaYume. Listing all of their mangas, what I'll do today. Kami-sama Kiss, Hana Kimi, Godchild, Wild Ones, Voiceover Academy, Skip Beat, Golden Days, Oresama Teacher, New York, and Animal Doctor. Wreck 'em, gotta wreck 'em all. HanaYume. This is definitely a parody song. Putting this on YouTube, what could go wrong? Furuba, Ferrari Girl, Gakuen Alice, Happy Cafe, and Tokyo Crazy Paradise. Anitomo, Juju, Bloody Kiss, Heroes Grade Wood, T-Prince. Wreck 'em, gotta wreck 'em all. Gotta wreck 'em all, HanaYume. Empty Empire, Sukeban Deka, Never Give Up, Hanoto Kuma, Okuno Chikyu, Patalliro, Arabesque, and Shiny Booty Go! Gotta wreck 'em all, gotta wreck 'em all. Come on! Gotta wreck 'em all, gotta wreck 'em all. Let's go! Gotta wreck 'em all, HanaYume. You're a very cute Karakurio get. The world is still beautiful. W. Juliet. Life's so life and don't think I would forget the #1 series with my girl Colleen. There's still hundreds of manga you've yet to read, giving you the best of them. Spot philosophy. Cursed Princess Servant, Bones B-Side, Ninkoi, Cyborg, Fudo, Kyoda, J. Kato Hyjin, Wadu Michael, Baby and Me, Dragonite. Wait, that's just a Pokemon. No, it's Dragonite by Yamaguchi Miyuki. Someone's a fake fan.
I literally just made this whole video.
Yeah, and I helped.
You sat there and you called me cringe the whole time.
That was me helping. You still didn't listen? Sing the last verse. Hikikomori Princess, Descendants of Darkness. Sacrificial Princess, Sugar Princess, Touring Express. A Chamanique, Glass Mask, Pig Millie. Pick more than a pretty face to fall in love. Wreck 'em, gotta wreck 'em all. Gotta wreck 'em all, HanaYume. Wreck 'em, gotta wreck 'em all. Gotta